Hello, and welcome to another edition of Jewish Museum Milwaukee's Museum Moments. I'm Molly Dubin, the curator with the museum, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today to talk about the continuing theme of this week, which Ellie touched on earlier, and that is famous Jewish Milwaukeeans. And today we are going to be talking specifically about Gene Wilder and Charlotte Rae. So I know we've already gotten some comments. There's a lot of people who have interest and connections. So I think it's going to be a great topic. So we're going to dive right in. Just give me a moment. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get rolling with our PowerPoint. And we're going to start the slideshow from the beginning. And there is just a great picture capturing kind of the quintessential expression of Gene Wilder. So Gene Wilder was, of course, born in Milwaukee. He was born June 11th of, born in 1923. And he was born Jerome Silberman. So he got bitten with the acting bug from a very early age. The story goes is that his father and his father's side, his father's family, and also on his maternal side, his maternal grandparents were Jewish immigrants from Russia, and they had a family store, and we're going to look at that in a little bit here. But he actually got the acting bug at the age of 8. His mother, unfortunately, had contracted rheumatoid arthritis and rheumatic fever, and the doctor said, if you want to help, you should try and find a way to make her laugh. And so that's what he did, and that's how he got going. His sister actually was involved with acting as well, and he followed her, into some of the classes, begged one of the teachers to get involved. The teacher said, if you're still interested when you're 13, come back, and we'll see if we can get you in. Of course, the day after he turned 13, he went in, and that was the start of his career. So the family lived in the Sherman Park neighborhood. And this is actually a photo of a dapper young Gene. And it actually gives the address there of the Silberman family. And this is from when he did an appearance in George Bernard Shaw's production of Candida, starring as the young poet March Banks. And this was performed at Wisconsin Avenue School. And I mentioned earlier that the family had a store. So this is a shot of Harry Silberman, the father, with his 6 sons, circa 1925. And the store was actually called the Silberman and Sons at the time. And that young figure kind of with his pants pulled up, standing next to just to the left of his father, who's behind the case there, that's young Gene. So before we get into some of his iconic roles, we're just going to go a little bit of a backstory here. So actually, I'm going to back it up so we're not distracted by Willy Wonka. So as I mentioned, he grew up in the Sherman Park neighborhood. He went to Washington High School. He actually, though, while he was younger, as I mentioned, was already involved with acting. His mother, who encouraged him, didn't feel like he was getting the opportunities that he should have. And so she actually sent him when he was younger to a military institute in Hollywood called Black Fox. And that was short-lived because he was bullied, and apparently that was because he was Jewish. Came back to Wisconsin, continued to be involved in local theater, went on to attend Washington high school, where he graduated in 1951, 1 year ahead of his classmates and also two individuals who lived in the same neighborhood as the Silberman family, Herb Cole and Bud Selig. So then Gene winds up doing more local theater. He goes to Iowa University, does more theater there, winds up heading to England, working at the Old Vic, the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, comes back to New York, and then he really goes many places. He winds up in Paris, back to New York, LA. So that's where we're going to pick it up here. So he has a breakout role earlier in a production of Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. But really, he gets his big break in starting in films that become iconic. One of them being Willy Wonka, and here he is. Willy Wonka is in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, a film that apparently didn't do particularly well back in the day, but of course has become just a classic for many, many generations. And children today still are very aware of the Oompa Loompas, I think. But he had a string of, very, very well-known films. He actually had a series of great involvement of films due to his relationship with Mel Brooks. And as I read it, the story goes, Gene had been starring in, a theater production with the actress Anne Bancroft. And Anne Bancroft introduced Gene Wilder to her then boyfriend, soon to be husband, Mel Brooks. So there they are, a little bit older in age. But we know that this became an incredibly fruitful relationship. Mel Brooks had written a screenplay called Springtime for Hitler that eventually became produced in a film version that was called The Producers. And Gene starred in the lead role, and actually as Leopold Bloom, and that was 1967. And that film was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. And that was, as I mentioned, the first of several collaborative films. Young Frankenstein being another great one. We all have great memories of that. Also of, that's Terry Garr to the right, and the very funny Marty Feldman to the left. And Young Frankenstein came out in 1974. Brooks and Wilder, Wilder co-wrote it, and they received an Academy Award nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay. Blazing Saddles, another classic. I can recall being introduced to this film and it becoming just, so iconic. And I think that's the case for so many. Of course, the Frisco Kid kind of in the same vein. He also then into the, 70s, 80s, and actually into the early 90s, 1991, I think was the last collaborative film, did several very well-known films with Richard Pryor. So Gene was married a couple times before he met actress Gilda Radner from Saturday Night Live. And he actually was married at the time, but they were smitten. They met in 1981. They eventually married after Gene left his then wife in 1984 in France. And this is a note that's actually written to his uncle Irv and his Aunt Anne here in Milwaukee. This is from the Jewish Museum Milwaukee archives. And this is a note about the wedding that took place in the south of France, and a lovely shot of Gilda and Gene. Gene went on to do a great deal more acting. The last role he actually did was in the early 2000s, and that was a guest role on Will and Grace, for which he won an Emmy for Best Guest Actor Performance. He was, long before that, and inducted into the Wisconsin Actor and Theater's Hall of Fame. Just a prolific body of work, and there's just so much we could get into. But of course, this is but a moment, and that is what we're going to talk about, because it's really only a snapshot. So the other famous Milwaukeean we want to talk about is Charlotte Rae. So Charlotte Rae was born in Milwaukee. Again, she was born April 22nd, 1926. And her actually given name was Charlotte Rae Lubotsky, which is a name that many people in this community will be familiar with. That's a great shot of her. She was someone who got into theater. She also, sang. But the backstory here on Charlotte is that her parents as well were immigrants from Russia. And actually, her mother was a childhood friend of Golda Meir. So her father, Meir, had a tire and appliance store that was located kind of on the fringe of the Haymarket district. And for the first 7 years of Charlotte's life, she and her 3 sisters and parents lived in an apartment above the Meir store. And then they moved to Shorewood, bought a house on Murray Avenue, and she attended Shorewood High School and graduated in 1944. She wound up doing some radio work in Wauwatosa. She moved to New York after attending Northwestern University, where she didn't finish school, but wound up meeting several who would be eventual famous people, including Cloris Leachman, who would go on to step into the Facts of Life, a show that we'll talk about in a second here after she departed. But then she went on to move to New York, 1948, did a great deal of theater work. Actually, her first big break in TV, which I find so funny because she always wanted to be a serious actress, and then she kind of wound up getting into comedy, was on the sitcom Car 64, Where Are You?, if some of you remember that. So she did that from 61 to 63. This is actually another throwback shot here. So this is Charlotte at her sister's wedding. And I kind of put this in here because there was some back and forth. She had gone, to New York in 48, TV debut in 1954. But she also was coming back and forth to Milwaukee to attend different events. There she is with someone who we think may be one of her 2 sons, who probably is the other son sitting to the left there, in the summer of 1956. And the reason I mentioned, one of the reasons I wanted to mention coming back to Milwaukee is that she often performed here for, different causes. And this was, of course, before her, a couple years before her quote unquote big break in Car 64, Where Are You? But this is an article from the Milwaukee Journal from 1952. And the reason I mention this is it talks about Charlotte performing with a couple of other actresses, performers, for a fundraiser for a Jewish convalescent home. And this was an endeavor that her father got started. Her father was very active in the Jewish community in many ways, and he actually donated land and raised funds for this Jewish convalescence home, the idea of which is that Jewish patients that were recovering at Mount Sinai Hospital would come and recoup at this home. And eventually, many years down the road, there would go on to be some mergers that eventually would become, in 1994, the Jewish Home and Care Center, which we now know as Ovation, located next door to the Jewish Museum Milwaukee. So probably her next really big break happened because of Norman Lear, another wonderfully talented Jewish individual I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Norman Lear created some of the most iconic sitcoms, and really groundbreaking too in terms of the issues that he took on, which really weren't done in the day. Of course, All in the Family comes immediately to mind with so many of the stereotypes and biases and issues that show dealt with. And in 1975, Charlotte became a cast member on Norman Lear's TV comedy Hot Eye Baltimore. And in 1978, a couple of the big networks were kind of struggling, and they wanted Norman to write a sitcom. Charlotte was one of his favorite actresses already. And so this wound up becoming Different Strokes. Again, another kind of a groundbreaking concept here. We have two young African-American children that have been adopted by Mr. Drummond here off to the left. Of course, Gary Coleman in the foreground. And she first here takes on the role of Edna Garrett. Now here she is a housekeeper. And apparently there is an episode in her latter stint on this show called the Girl episode. And Mr. Drummond here has one biological child, a daughter named Kimberly. And Mrs. Garrett is asked to go and help Kimberly get kind of settled at a girls' school out east. And this winds up spinning off into what would become really her most famous role, Mrs. Edna Garrett on The Facts of Life. And here she is with the primary cast members here. A couple changes take place. The original school that Kimberly visited was, I believe it was East Lake. The school becomes Eastland, and she is a housekeeper, becomes kind of house mother to these girls attending this boarding school out east, and just becomes a beloved figure, a household name. This is an article from the Wisconsin Jewish Chronicle from 1985. Looking back at some memories about Charlotte Rae, who I should mention dropped the name Lubotsky, was performing professionally under Charlotte Rae beginning kind of in the mid-1950s. And she had some health problems. She actually, really in her 50s, had some heart issues, and there was a pacemaker that was installed, but and that did well for about 30 years apparently, and then did not. There was also some pancreatic cancer that ran in the family, and after a valiant battle, she died on August 5th, 2018 at the age of 92, but not without leaving us so many iconic memories. So again, that's just a snapshot. We've kind of gone over our moment here, but there was so much to take in. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're interested, we have more in our archives, particularly about Gene Wilder, also some more on Charlotte Rae. And if you want to learn more about what we're doing at the museum, visit us at jewishmuseummilwaukee.org. And we will hope to see you again soon for another program or museum moment. Have a great day. Thanks.